Hi, and welcome to Book Chat. I'm Kate.
And I'm Theresa, and we're your hosts.
That's right. And today we're covering Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen.
Yes, we are very excited. This is going to be our first video and podcast that comes out. And it's a very special one to me personally because I have a big history with the world of Jane Austen. And for Kate, it's a little different. Kate, what's your history with Jane Austen?
The only exposure I have had to Jane Austen was a Wishbone. If you're a millennial, you'll probably remember Wishbone on PBS. The dog who dressed up as different characters from literature and reenacted them. And he played Darcy, Mr. Darcy, in Pride and Prejudice. And that is my only exposure to Jane Austen. So this was a new experience for me.
There are so many different versions of all the different books, especially her 6 major works, that I am a little surprised that you haven't seen any of them.
No, that's right. I haven't seen any of the movies either. So,
No movies. There's a really, really wonderful adaptation that's a miniseries of Pride and Prejudice that was a family favorite for mine. We would watch that multiple times a year. So today, I'm going to be starting off with a little biography of Jane Austen and her history with writing. And then we're going to do some summaries, and then I'm going to be asking Kate all of the questions. So this is a brand new podcast, and just a little heads up, we do have a structure to it. We're going to be asking questions that are going to be similar from week to week, but usually we're going to be asking them back and forth. This week, it's going to be me basically interviewing Kate and then adding my own thoughts to some of the different questions. Jane Austen was born in 1775 to her parents George and Cassandra Austen. She started reading and writing from an early age and was encouraged to do so by her family. In her youth, her evenings were often spent reading stories, most often her own works of fiction, to her family. By the 1790s, she had written her first full-fledged novel, Sense and Sensibility, originally titled Eleanor and Marianne. In 1811, Jane Austen was finally successful at selling the copyright for her first novel, Sense and Sensibility, anonymously under the pseudonym A Lady. Over the next 60 years, Austen would write the other 5 major works that she is known for: Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Northanger Abbey, Emma, and Persuasion. Of these works, only Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, and Emma would be published during Austen's lifetime. In 1817, Austen would start a 7th book titled Brothers, but would abandon the work after a few chapters due to illness. In 1817, Austen died of an unknown illness, some today believed to be Addison's disease. Jane Austen was 41 years old when she passed away.
That was really interesting about Jane Austen. And that reminds me, we forgot to mention we're sisters-in-law.
Yes, we're sisters-in-law. Yes. And the reason that we're doing this via a video is because we are in different states.
Yes, we live quite a ways away from each other.
Yes.
But yeah, we're sisters-in-law. Teresa's my best friend. She's married to my brother, and we both love books.
We do.
So it kind of naturally came to this. And our families are big readers as well.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Especially your family. Everyone in your family is a big reader. In my family, definitely my mom and I are probably the biggest readers, but to my dad's credit, he is reading more and more every single year. We're thrilled to see it. And that leads me to my next point. If you're not a big reader, you are still more than welcome to stay and listen to this podcast.
Here's my summary, and I hope I interpreted the novel correctly, because The Census is my first experience of Jane Austen. It's a bit of a learning curve for me. Sense and Sensibility is a novel written by Jane Austen in the late 1700s. It was then published in 1811. It is a character study about 2 sisters, Eleanor and Marianne. One is considered to have sense, while the other has sensibility, according to the definitions of the time period. Sense is the intellectual capacity for understanding, judgment, or awareness, and this is what Eleanor possesses, while her younger sister, Marianne, is the sister with the trait of sensibility, which, according to the Cambridge University Press, in the 1800s meant a heightened responsiveness of feeling or emotion. Both women are faced with heartbreak as their lovers prove to be involved with other women. Eleanor responds with her characteristic sense, while Marianne responds with sensibility. Ultimately, both women find love, Eleanor with her original lover and Marianne with a very sensible man, while overcoming personal obstacles and showing the reader how 2 different personality types respond to similar circumstances.
That's very good. I think that's a really good summary of the book. Mine is much shorter, but actually along the same lines. Sense and Sensibility, written by Jane Austen, is a unique study between the contrasting personalities of 2 sisters. The eldest sister, Eleanor, believes the weight of the world is on her shoulders and suffers through life changes, falling in love, experiencing heartache, and watching her sister's own heartbreak. Eleanor believes that she must keep her feelings and other people's secrets to herself, causing the weight to give her unbearable stress. The second sister, Marianne, is a 17-year-old with her head in the clouds. She is passionate and opinionated and not shy about speaking her mind. She falls in love with the wrong man and suffers severe heartbreak, but at the end of it finds the man she was truly meant to be with.
Very interesting. And I think a preview to how differently maybe we view the
Yeah.
sisters,
Yeah.
which I
Yes.
find very interesting.
Yes. But before we start actually talking about the books, I'd like to know how you read the book. Did you listen? Did you read? How did you consume it?
So I listened to like the first three chapters, and the chapters are very short in Jane Austen books if you have not read Jane Austen. And so I started out listening to the first three chapters, so that not very much of it at all. And I realized very quickly that I needed to switch to reading the material
Mhm.
because I was not absorbing everything and I needed to be able to go back and reread paragraphs, which is harder to do when you're listening to an audiobook. I would read for 10 minutes. I'd set a timer for 10 minutes and then I would take a 10-minute break. And then I would read
Okay.
again for
Oh,
10 minutes and
okay.
take a 10-minute break because I needed that time to like absorb the
Absorb.
language and everything that was happening. I do have ADHD, so I don't know if that was it. Had to make sure to take the stimulant before reading. But the further I got along into it, the less I needed those breaks and the more like involved I got in the story and more the language just made sense. If you're like me, new to Jane Austen or classics, just know that it's okay to take it very slowly and like absorb it and you do get into the flow of things.
You do. It's like listening to Shakespeare where at first you're like, "What is going on?" And then about halfway through the play, you're like, "I get it." And then after the play's over, you're thinking in Shakespearean and you're like, "Okay, this is exhausting."
Yes, but how did you read it?
I started by reading it, but then I ended up switching to listening to it most of the time because I have read through all of her books. I think I've listened to every single one on audiobook in the past. I can get into the headspace really, really quickly. So the last day of listening, I think I listened to half the book in just one block. I
Wow.
just started listening and then I was doing chores and just finished the book while I was working
Mhm.
away. Although I do have a book of quotes, and every single time a good quote would come up, I would pause, I would see what chapter it is, I would go into the book, and then I would write the quote down.
That's a lot of work.
It is, but I find it very relaxing. I've been doing it with all the books that we've been reading, is I have to stop and I wanna quote it
That's smart because
correctly.
I've
So
needed to figure out how to do that. I underlined things. Not sure if you can
Oh,
see
okay.
that, but that's a good note to say that we don't care how you read. If you read with an audiobook, if someone reads to you, if you read a physical copy on Kindle or however you choose to do it, it's reading to
It's
us.
reading. It's all reading, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Yes, the importance is about consuming the work.
Yes. One other thing before I start asking Kate questions is that this is a book club, so there's going to be spoilers. And we recognize that Jane Austen's been around for over 200 years. So for a lot of people, they're going to know the stories, whether they've read the books or not. But if you haven't read the books, seen it in the movies, just know that there's going to be spoilers. So if you don't like that, click away. All right. We're going to just hop right into asking Kate these questions. What did you like about the book?
First of all, I enjoyed reading a classic that I had not read before. I have not read a lot of classic American literature just because how my high school curriculum was set up. So I did enjoy reading a book that I'd not been exposed to, especially a classic that so many people reference and that you love. So I really enjoyed that. But more than that, I liked that it was a historically accurate picture of two sisters in the late 1700s, early 1800s, because I've read a lot of historical fiction set about that time, and I've watched Bridgerton, which is set a little later. But it was very interesting to read about it from someone who lived it, Jane Austen, who was living in this time period, and then seeing how it was written. I thought it was less romanticized, maybe a little bit, than a lot of the historical fiction I've read, and definitely less than Bridgerton if you've watched Bridgerton. Very less romanticized than Bridgerton. But I also just really appreciated how much I was able to relate to the sisters. I was extremely surprised that I was able to relate to them because I was like, they're from like a long time ago. Like can't relate to that, can't relate to
Right.
Jane Austen, but I found things to relate to in both sisters. And
Mhm.
I became very fond of several of the characters, including some side characters.
Your point about liking the fact that you're reading about the 18th century from somebody who's living in the 18th century is my main point for why I love the book so
Hmm.
much. Because we can read all the historic fiction that we want that's about that time period or a little bit later, but it just doesn't have quite the same
Yes.
oomph to it. It doesn't quite feel the same. And you can be a great historian and try to be as accurate as possible. And there's always going to be discrepancies. But
Teresa's a
with
great one to say this because of her degree, by the
Yes.
way.
Yes, I have a degree in history, and I do struggle with historical fiction, to be honest, because I'm critiquing more than I
Mhm.
probably is probably fair for the author. But when you were reading Jane Austen or Charles Dickens, they're writing about their time period in their time period, which is perfect. I love that. So, all right, next question. What did you struggle with when reading the book?
I think it probably goes without saying that I struggled a little bit with the writing style, especially at first, because Jane Austen is extremely wordy. And there are some words that are either not used in common vernacular today or they have different meanings. Sensibility in the title even has a different meaning today. So I did have to do a little bit of research to like kind of make sure I knew what was going on or use context clues. Very glad for those English teachers and reading teachers who taught me how to do that. So I struggled at the beginning with getting into the flow of things, but once I also kept in mind the time period, because there were other things I struggled with. First of all, the girls are very young, and one of them ends up with an older man. So, like, Marianne is around 16, but around 19, she marries a man who's like in his 30s. And I struggled a bit with reconciling that at first, but Teresa had texted me, you texted me to remember the time period and Marianne's age. And so it was easy to see that she wasn't persuaded or anything, but I mean,
Mm-mm.
women did need to marry then to have any sort of security in the world. So once I took into account the time period and things like that, I began to struggle a lot less with some of the actions of some of the characters.
With every single one of Jane Austen's books. And this is pretty true of most classics, I feel, is the characters will monologue. They just
Yes.
talk and talk and talk, and there's a lot less back and forth. When you're watching a Jane Austen movie, the way that the scripts are written is more natural to how people actually talk.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit easier sometimes to absorb what's actually happening in a scene when you're watching a movie than when you're reading the book. John Dashwood, Eleanor and Marianne's half brother, older half brother, he sometimes some of the scenes he takes up most of the chapter and he's just
Yes.
and then Willoughby does it a few times and you'll have maybe a little insert of somebody just adding a comment in, but it like doesn't break their flow and then it just keeps going. So that's my main struggle when I read actually most classics from the 18th and 19th centuries.
I picked up on that. And in fact, when I was going back to find my quotes that I'd underlined, I'd have to go back like whole pages to figure out who was talking at that moment.
Right.
Because I was like, who said that? Because like there's no, it's just like a monologue. It's like four paragraphs.
Exactly, exactly. And another thing, when it comes to the writing style, there should definitely be more paragraphs.
Hmm.
Sometimes the topic has changed multiple times in a single paragraph where you kind of
Yes.
lose track of what in the world is going on.
That is not how it would be edited today.
No, no. To be fair, if we go back to my little summary of Jane Austen's life, she was a teenager when she started writing Sense and Sensibility. They're not sure when she finished writing the book, but they do think that she was either 19, 20, or 21 years old when she finished. So she herself was very young while she was writing this.
Which is incredibly impressive and also puts some of the characters' choices into context.
It does, because the characters are young, Austen is young, so it sort of makes sense and it kind of ties things together in a different way than if you were to think of her as a 35-year-old woman writing about, 17 and 19-year
Right.
olds.
Yes. And you read about it, and some of the times they do seem like adolescents, the two sisters, because Marianne is like 16 and Eleanor's like 19, I think, when the book begins. And at times I was like, they're so young. But, at 16, 19 years old, I probably acted very similar or could have acted very similar.
Yes. I believe Marianne is 17 when the book begins, but she
Okay.
reflects on her 16-year-old self, thinking about how she would never find a man.
Which is very something a
Uh,
17-year-old would do.
Absolutely. It would be something a 16-year-old would do. Be like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I haven't found a man yet. Is it ever going to happen?"
Yes,
So
I think one of
dramatic.
her quotes was something like it was basically something along like, "I shall be alone forever, I am too much for everyone," which is very adolescent.
It is very adolescent. Also, she is a lot, so I kinda
She
get where
is
she
a
where
lot,
she's
yeah,
where
she
she's
is a
coming
lot.
from.
But aren't all teenage girls?
Yeah, yeah, especially ones with her type of personality.
Temperament, yes.
Exactly. What is a part of the book that you would return to and read again?
Probably I would reread where Eleanor realizes she's gonna have her happy ever after. Eleanor's beau, the man she was in love with, she had found out that he was engaged to be married to another girl. And then she discovers very late in the book, towards the end, that he'd broken off that engagement. And that woman was horrible.
She's horrible.
She's horrible.
She has to be a teenager too. The way that she's
I think
acting.
so,
Yeah,
definitely.
I don't think
Yeah.
they ever say what her age is, but she has to be a teenager.
She's like one of the popular girls, you see in movies that is like so mean
One of the mean
and like
girls.
so a mean girl. Yes, she's a mean girl who's like so passive aggressive. And
She
she was so well written though.
she
Lucy is her
is.
name. And she's so well written and the things she says, Eleanor, that are
They're
so passive
calculating.
aggressive and calculating and manipulative, and it makes you hate her, which is very well good writing, very well done writing.
She's heard of Eleanor and she's trying to stake her territory basically. Like
Hmm.
Edward is mine and no one knows that we're engaged, to keep it a secret. And Edward is mine,
Yes.
basically.
She was very manipulative.
She's
So
very manipulative.
I would go back and read the part where she finds her happily ever after. Maybe I would also probably go back and read some of the scenes about Mrs. Jennings. Mrs. Jennings was like their chaperone who went with them, who took him to her house in London. And Mrs. Jennings is hilarious.
She's so fun. I love Mrs. Jennings. She's
Yes,
one of my
she's one of my favorite
favorites.
characters. Yes.
Yes.
I was like, oh, Jane Austen's funny. I think I
Sh
texted that to
You
you.
did. That was the first thing that you said when you started reading was, "Jane Austen is funny."
Yeah.
And she
And Mrs.
is.
Jennings is a really funny character, but
She
she
is.
also loves Eleanor and Marianne, so she's a really endearing character.
Yes. Yeah. She's sort of silly, but Jane Austen pulls it off because she's also motherly and
Yes.
caring, and sure, she's nosy, but she's also really insightful.
Yes,
So,
she gets some things very wrong and
yeah.
some things so right and
So
so
right.
insightful, and it's obvious she's helping the girls navigate their way through young adulthood.
She has 2 married daughters, so she's basically taken them on as 2 daughters that are unmarried that maybe she could help get married.
Mhm. She
So,
really likes to see people married. They make a point of
yes.
that.
Yes, yes. Probably the part of the book that I enjoy the most and that I find the most hilarious and would return to is when the Dashwoods find out that Lucy is engaged to Edward, and Mrs. John Dashwood is like, "Oh, um, Lucy is so great, and I love her so much, and."
Before she finds out.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
and then she has invited Lucy over to stay at their house in London, and she won't invite Eleanor and Marianne even though they're her sisters-in-law,
Mhm.
and then Lucy pulls out that she's engaged to Edward, and, Mrs. John Dashwood loses her mind, and I absolutely love that. She
She's, like, in
really
complete hysterics. It was really funny, and
it's
it was kind of like you had that coming to you, girl, too, because you
you
are not a nice person.
She's not a nice person, but she doesn't want Edward to be with Eleanor because she doesn't think that Eleanor is she doesn't have the money, she doesn't have the status. So, and Lucy is even of a lower status than Eleanor. So, Lucy to her is just this friend that she can be friends with and flaunt. But then when she finds out that she's trying to marry Edward, she's like, well, that's not good either. So I really like that scene. I think that scene's
Yeah, that
hilarious.
scene is very good, and just the absolute hysterics she's in is really funny.
All right. Let's move on to the plot. Did the book have a gripping beginning to you?
So, story-wise, yes. So it starts off with Mr. John Dashwood, who is the half-brother of the two sisters, Eleanor and Marianne, promising his father, who was dying and was the girl's father, that he would take care of his stepmother and the girls. And then he has this conversation with his wife, Franny or Fanny?
Fanny, yes.
Fanny, yes, Fanny. She starts off, she's like, surely he didn't mean for you to really promise that. Surely you could give him them less. And then he's like, yes, I could give them this much. She's like, oh, he wouldn't want you to be impoverished. So let's do even less money. And it's just a very funny way to start. And just, you hate those two characters
Mhm.
immediately. So that drew me in because I was like, oh my God, this is awful. And it
Yes.
also made me really like the girls before they really entered the picture and their mom. But it also was a slow beginning to me because I was getting used to the writing style and everything. So that made it a little slow. But story wise, once I was able to comprehend the language and read a bit quicker, it was really good. It was really funny. And I think that was about the time in these first couple paragraphs, first couple chapters where I texted Teresa and I was like, Jane Austen's funny.
I have to agree with this story itself is gripping, but when you first start reading it, it's not gripping. I know that there's all those things out there that if the first 5 sentences don't grip you, then you're not gonna like the book. Come on, don't be that person. Keep
Yeah,
reading.
you have to be a little bit more flexible with Sense and Sensibility in
Yes.
any classic, I believe, because you have
Yes.
to give yourself time to get used to the writing style.
And that could be true about a lot of books out there,
It
that maybe
is.
maybe the first chapter or so isn't as gripping as you want it to be, but that doesn't mean it's not gonna get there. But I think the thing that really I struggle with the first chapter of Sense and Sensibility is the description of what's going on with the will. It's so confusing.
It was confusing, and I felt a bit unnecessary. All we really needed to know was that the women were supposed to receive this much money and be taken care of by their brother, and he
He
broke the agreement.
Yeah. Yes. So they're still gonna get their like 500 pounds a year or something like that.
Mhm.
And then his father says, take care of them with his wife manipulating him. He doesn't really see that taking care of them means monetarily. And I find it so funny because later on, when he's talking to Eleanor, this is pretty late in the book. She's talking about her new acquaintances and friendships and the different ways that they benefit her. And he's like, yeah, that's great because he himself doesn't want to take care of them. And he's like, oh, good.
Mhm.
Somebody else is taking care of
Yes,
them.
he's like, Mrs. Jennings has lots of money. It's so good you're friends with her.
Right, right. And I think he at one point talks about Colonel Brandon because Colonel Brandon has
Yes.
money. And so, but overall, just the will stuff, like you could probably skip like the first, all but the like last paragraph to the first chapter and you'd be
Yes.
good. You'd be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, I kinda
So
glazed over for that beginning part. I was like, "I have to read this. This is not great. What was Teresa thinking?"
one of the things that I find amusing about the book, and I think it's meant to be amusing, is that they're making 500 pounds a year. These 4 women,
Mhm.
3 women and Margaret, she's, I think 11 or 12, maybe 13, the 3rd sister. But Jane Austen's father, he made 200 pounds a year as a reverend. And so they're actually living pretty comfortably. They're
I
still
did note that they were actually living very comfortably because I think they even had 2 servants.
They had 2 servants. Yeah, they had that, uh, man
Man, they called
and then
him
that
a ma
the manservant and then a cook or something like that. Yeah.
cooker maid. Yeah.
Yes, they are actually living pretty well above what Jane Austen's family was living at that time. Did the book go in the direction you expected?
Yes and no. I did figure out about halfway through the book that Marianne was gonna end up with Colonel Brandon.
I probably spoiled that just a little bit
I
with
think
my
you did.
text.
I think you
Yeah.
did because you said something about that, which I think could have been a surprise because she was so against marrying Colonel Brandon because I think he
Mhm.
was a widow.
No, he never married the
He
girl that he
n
was supposed to.
he never married the girl you're supposed to. And Marianne firmly believed there was only one true love, and,
Right.
like, you couldn't have passion
And
for
she thought
another
he
woman.
was infirm. She thought he was old.
Yes, she said he was infirm, and then I read he's 36, and I'm a year older than that, and I'm like, "Oh, okay. Thanks, Marianne." So, that part wasn't as complete, and I actually felt there was we talk about foreshadowing later, I feel like there was enough foreshadowing for that I would have
Mhm.
figured that out.
Right. Yep.
But I was surprised she married him without falling in love with him first.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
was a sensible thing to do, a very Eleanor-esque thing. So I was very surprised that she did that. I was also very, very surprised that things worked out for Eleanor to marry the person that she loved from the very beginning, Edward. I did not see that happening.
When you texted me to say that Edward was a terrible person, it took everything in my body not to be like, "Hold on, wait."
Yes, because Edward actually did the honorable thing and
Mhm.
got out of his engagement and even risked losing his inheritance and things to end up with
Did lose him.
Eleanor.
Yep, yep.
Did lose most of his inheritance. In fact, he became a reverend,
Mhm.
which seems like something he always wanted to
Wanted
do
to
anyway.
do. Yeah, he talks about it at the very beginning.
But he and Eleanor live relatively humble. I say relatively because, again, they're living pretty good
They
for
are.
they have like a nice house and everything, and they have a patron and things. But I did not see things lining up so that Edward would end up with Eleanor. So that was a surprise to me.
Yes, very good writing on Jane Austen's part
Hmm.
to bring that character back around because Eleanor spends so much of the book after she meets Lucy just being hurt, but at the same time, also disparaging Lucy. She's just like she's
Hmm.
unintelligent and she's just not right for him, which I think is pretty messed up of her, quite honestly.
Eleanor,
Um,
really?
she's so judgy. She's so judgy of Lucy. I know that
I
Lucy's
did not get that impression.
over and over again, whenever she's around Lucy, she's thinking about the fact that Lucy's not right for Edward. She does it every single time Lucy's around.
I
And
think Lucy kind of brings that on purpose, though, because she is so awful to Eleanor.
she is, but that's not why Eleanor is thinking about it. She consistently calls her illiterate and unintelligent and uninformed. Yeah,
But she does do it internally instead
she
of
does.
externally,
She does.
which
I don't
I
know if that
think is
makes
a
it any
very
better,
natural
but
thing to do.
it probably is.
It's a
It
reflection of her jealousy.
It is a reflection of her jealousy, but I do struggle with Eleanor because she internalizes absolutely everything and then she becomes bitter. So she does things and she has these like nasty remarks to people that she reacts really quickly and she says just like really unnecessary things.
Oh, I found her so clever and funny and sarcastic.
She is clever, she is sarcastic. I don't always think that it's kind. So I do have a couple of examples when we get to quotes later on.
I would say
So
she isn't kind all the time either, but I also say that a lot of people she isn't kind to deserve her unkindness.
but she is kind of mean to Marianne.
I would have been mean to Marianne too.
Okay, all right. We're gonna pause real quick. I like Marianne because she reminds me of you.
What?
Yep, that's why. And I mean that in a way that I love you, and this is not an insult, so don't take this as an insult. But Marianne is not afraid to show her emotions.
Hmm.
She doesn't get forced to do things that she doesn't want to do. Like there's that scene where everybody's playing games and they're like, "Why won't she play games?" And that's you. You're like, "I don't want to play that game. I'm not going to play that game."
Yeah.
And you're not afraid to say the things that are on your mind. You don't have much of a filter, and Marianne has no filter.
That is true. That's so funny because I did write later because originally I was like, I relate to Eleanor so much. And I did decide later that I would like to be Eleanor, but I'm probably more Marianne.
See, that's me. I don't want to be Eleanor, but I'm definitely more Marianne, and I see you as Marianne. Anyways.
Did you answer if it went in the direction you expected? I mean, you've read
Oh,
it many times,
so
but
my answer to this was I can't say for sure.
mhm.
I have known this story pretty much my entire life. I think I remember watching the movie when it came out in 1995, probably in
Oh, wow.
1995. I was probably 4 or 5 years old when I first saw
Wow.
that movie. So, which is one of the great things about Jane Austen. She's very family friendly.
Mhm.
Uh, I couldn't tell you if it goes in the direction I expected or
Right,
not
because you've
because
just
I'm
been
so
so
familiar. Yeah, it's been in my
familiar with the
life
work.
for over 20 years.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point.
were there parts of the book that surprised you?
Like I mentioned, Eleanor ending up with Edward was very surprising. I was surprised sometimes at the cutting remarks Eleanor managed to pull off. I was like, oh, wow, that is a little vicious. And
Yeah.
I'm surprised and impressed with Jane Austen's ability to be so funny. That was one of the things that surprised me the most was her sense of humor, and it was very subtle at times. You had to really read it, and I had to read a couple things again and again to be like, "What? Did she really just did she mean that the way she meant it?" So, that was very surprising to me.
I'm with you there. It is fantastic that she's so funny. Willoughby is drunk and he comes to talk to Eleanor, and I forgot about that
Yes.
scene. That scene was so surprising because in my mind, after he marries whatever her name was, he just sort of disappears. I forgot that he comes back around and is apologetic.
Yes, he learns Marianne is sick, and this moves him, and probably being drunk also moves him
Yes.
to, like, come and apologize for his actions and give some
Mhm.
sort of context to them, which I was so surprised Eleanor was like, "Poor Willoughby." I was
I
like, "Not
know!
poor Willoughby, he's
No!
still a terrible person."
I made that comment too. I was like, she should not forgive him. She should not forgive him because, I mean, okay, forgive him, but don't let him back in. Don't feel sorry for him.
Yeah, she
Just,
was like, "He's pitiful," which, okay, yeah, he is
yeah, he was
pitiful,
pitiful.
but
Yeah.
she was like, yes, she had forgiven him, and she was quite moved. I was like, "Eleanor,
No, no, girl,
come on.
don't,
Come
don't.
on."
I do kind of wonder if it had been Mary Ann in that situation that Willoughby is apologizing to, if she would have had a different reaction because she was so big about her emotions, and once she had been like, "You're dead to me," I think that he would have been dead to her, and Eleanor was a little bit more gracious about it, you know? I don't I
Yes, I mean, it helps that he didn't wrong Eleanor in the same way he wronged Marianne.
Right. True,
So, for those of you who
true.
haven't read Sense and Sensibility, Willoughby led Marianne on, made her think that they were basically engaged, and in this entire time, he had a fiancé. So,
He didn't, no.
well, he had someone he was involved with, right?
So he is with Mary Ann and he leaves abruptly because it comes out that a girl he gets pregnant has had her baby and
That's
her
right.
and his aunt disinherits him and he doesn't want to lose the money because he owes a bunch of debt. So he goes
Yes.
out and he finds himself a fiance that has 50,000 pounds.
So,
So
he's a man who's just after money, and
he's
Marianne
after
didn't fit
money.
the bill.
Mm-mm. No.
So he abandons her and he treats her very poorly, not even giving her the courtesy to let her know that he is getting married. And it's so I was just floored that Eleanor had any sympathy for him
I know.
whatsoever.
I know. I was too. I was too. I totally forgot about that part of the book, and that part surprised me. And I think what surprised me is one of the things that I have to remember when I'm reading Jane Austen is that this is not Victorian. They're constantly alone with men. Like she's just alone with Willoughby.
Yes, I
There's
was
no
surprised at that
chaperones.
too, that there were no like chaperones in the room. They
Yes,
could like go and be in the room alone.
right. And when the scene where Marianne thinks that Willoughby is going to propose, Eleanor, Mrs. Dashwood, and their sister Margaret are all out of the house, and it's just
Hmm.
Marianne and Willoughby alone. And when they come back, they find out that Willoughby's leaving, and Marianne's really hysterical about it. But there's so many scenes where the women are just alone with the men, and I kept having to be like, this is not a Victorian novel, so they didn't see it as horrible as later writers
Yeah,
would.
that was something that took me a minute to get used to as well.
You talked about this a little bit already, but what foreshadowing was in the book that played out later?
I think the continued fact that Colonel Brandon was obviously in love with Marianne. So I thought there was a lot of foreshadowing that Colonel Brandon was going to end up with one of the women, and the fact that he was continually drawn back to Marianne. I thought that he was in the story enough. He was actually probably the man I felt that was in the story the most
He
because he
was.
he visited the women the most. He was very dedicated to them. He seemed like a very good man to me.
I love Colonel Brandon. One of the foreshadowings that I see in the book is that when Eleanor finds out that Lucy and Edward have been engaged for 4 years, I think it foreshadows that she's going to get together with him because it's obvious that he's a very, very loyal person. He
Mhm.
doesn't break his promises. He's going to stand by this person that he made a promise to, even though he recognizes that it was impulsive and he was young and that was a mistake. But I think that actually does end up foreshadowing a little bit, not a whole lot, that it's probably going to work out for him and Eleanor, and that, beyond the book, he's going to stay by her side no matter what.
It seemed a bit of an afterthought because it was so far at the end of the book that we didn't get to enjoy it very much. And I thought at that point, when we were nearing the end of the book, I thought neither of these women are going to end up married or engaged.
Just a warning, that's how it is in all of her books.
Interesting.
Mm.
But I also know that them finding love is almost a subplot because the focus of the book is more on their contrasting personalities.
True. That's a good point. Yes.
So even though I was surprised, very surprised at the series of events that led Edward back to Eleanor, especially because there is this moment where they see Lucy in town and their manservant comes and tells her that she is
Farrah's. Yeah.
Mrs. Ferris, which is Colonel Brandon's last name.
No,
And
Edward's last name.
Edward's last name, sorry, which is Edward's last name. And so at that point, Eleanor truly despairs of ever getting together with Edward again or even seeing him. And it turns out that Lucy, in a surprising turn of events, had married Edward's older brother. So
Yeah, younger brother
who had been given the inheritance of an older brother. So that was a very surprising turn of events that I did not expect. But even though it felt very convenient to the plot that everything worked out for Eleanor and Edward, I felt like it made sense.
I think one of my favorite moments after Eleanor and Edward get engaged is them sitting around trying to figure out how Lucy manipulated her way into Robert's heart and how Robert hasn't been disinherited when Edward was disinherited for being engaged to Lucy. But why hasn't Robert?
I think their mother just truly loved Robert more.
Well, Robert's the outgoing one. He's going to have the public life, and Edward wants to be a reverend.
Yeah, he is. He always matched what his mother wanted of him in society and things like that. Edward just kind of didn't quite get there. He's a very different personality type.
Yes, absolutely.
Which I did feel that there was actually a trope of having siblings be opposite from one another or very different. You see Edward and you see, of course, Marianne and Eleanor. You see Edward and his brother. You also see
Mrs. Middleton and her sister Charlotte.
Yes. Mrs. Jennings, wasn't it?
No, Mrs. Jennings is their mom. Charlotte is
Mrs.
the
Middleton,
younger daughter. Yes,
and her daughter Charlotte, and then also Lucy and her sister were very somewhat different as well. So I felt like that was a trope that Jane Austen really used throughout the book to illustrate the difference. And also, some of those siblings don't get along. But it's important to note that Eleanor and Marianne do get along despite their very, very different personalities.
Right. Yes. Was also contemplating the differing personalities between the siblings. And then I thought about myself and my siblings and like you and Chris. And I was like, oh, actually, that's kind of accurate. You know, like my sister is a little bit more Eleanor. I'm a little bit more Marianne, and we complement each other, you know? So.
If I'm Marianne, then is Chris Eleanor?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he is actually.
The man who internalizes everything. Yes.
Yeah, he is Eleanor. Oh, very interesting.
Oh, that's so funny. Let's see. Were there any plot holes?
I mean, it was pretty convenient how they ended up with each other, but I didn't think it was necessarily a plot hole. I just thought it was the way she wrote it made everything tie up in a very neat bow.
Mm-hmm.
So
I feel like that's very British.
Yes, like the end of a British mystery. It ties up in a very neat, nice bow.
Exactly.
No, nothing there. I also struggle with this question a little bit because while I was somewhat familiar with customs at that time, I probably wouldn't have noticed something that maybe was a huge plot hole.
That's true. And yeah, I personally don't notice really any plot holes. My main issue is, and this is also very typical English writer, there are so many characters. Like you're just trying to keep track of absolutely everybody.
As you've all noticed, probably I'm having trouble keeping track of all of them.
There's so many because, like we mentioned, for some reason she's like, if there's one of them, then there's going to be a sibling that contrasts them, and you have Mrs. Middleton, and then later on they introduce her sister Charlotte, and it's like, why do we need to have Charlotte around? Although I do enjoy Charlotte. I love Eleanor trying to figure out what makes her so happy all the time.
Right. I noticed that, but it helped me a lot when you explained the addresses and how the women were referred to. So maybe you could go ahead and go into that a little bit, because that was very helpful for me, and I think would be helpful to anyone reading the books for the first time.
Yes, especially because Jane Austen sort of switches back and forth sometimes, especially when she's talking about Eleanor. So this might not be 100% accurate, but for the most part, when you have a group of siblings. We're gonna just talk about the girls, just a group of girls. They're all sisters. The oldest sister is going to be called Miss and then the last name. So Eleanor is Eleanor Dashwood, so she'd be referred to in society as Miss Dashwood. All younger sisters after that would be Miss, their first name. So Miss Marianne, Miss Margaret. And then when someone is married, they're going to be Mrs. So Eleanor becomes Mrs. Ferrars. And oftentimes, if there's more Mrs. Ferrars in the family, she'd be her husband's first name. So Mrs. Edward Ferrars. So
Yes.
that's sort of the breakdown of the addresses. Interestingly, every once in a while, Jane Austen calls Eleanor Miss Dashwood when she's
I
writing
noticed
about
that,
her.
and then I'd be like, "Huh?"
Yes, right. Like, wait. Sometimes I'd be like, why is mom here?
Yeah,
Because they called her
exactly.
Mrs. Dashwood the whole time.
So, when
So,
you
yeah.
explained that to me, that made a lot of sense. So, I think that's helpful for anyone who is maybe reading this for a school project or for fun. It just helps keep everybody kind of straight.
Just run down who, in your mind, were the main characters.
Well, of course, we had Eleanor and Marianne. They were the, I think, two main characters. And then we had a lot of side characters.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the two men, well, three men were very significant was
Mhm.
Edward Willoughby, even though he wasn't in it that much, especially the later half of the book, and Colonel Brandon. Colonel Brandon, who I mentioned already, was the man who was in here the most. So they were very important. And then you had some side characters, which include their mother, Mrs. Dashwood, I believe. And
Yes.
then Mrs. Jennings, who we've already talked about. Mrs. Jennings was in most of the book.
Mhm.
And then, of course, we had Lucy, who becomes Edward's ex fiance and sister in law. And we have Fanny and Mr. John Dashwood, who are related to Eleanor and Marianne. And there's so many characters,
There's
really,
so
to be
many
honest.
characters. Yeah. And then you have Sir John Middleton, who
Yes, Sir John
rents
Middleton.
them the cottage that they're living in. Yes. Yes. So there's so many characters. In fact, they when you watch the movie, they naturally do away with some of the characters. I listed the same people as you, but I just also added Sir John Milton because
I forgot about him.
he he and John Dashwood are interesting because you're seeing men through a young female's eyes, Jane Austen's eyes,
Yes,
and they're both idiots. I mean,
they really
John
are.
Middleton is very nice, like he's super accommodating, but there's the scene where Marianne is trying to get information about Willoughby, and she's like, "What's his character like? What is he like?" And he's just talking about the hunting dog, and he
Yeah,
doesn't
he's like, he's a great
understand.
hunter. He has great dogs.
He has great dogs, yeah, and he doesn't seem to understand her question at all. And then you have John Dashwood, who is just so stupid, and he's so weak. He just does what his wife wants, you know. What were the characters like, and what roles did they play? Do ones that we haven't really talked about, because I know we've talked about Eleanor and Marianne a lot.
Well, we've mentioned Mrs. Jennings, and she was a very funny and very nurturing woman who really cared dearly about the girls. Sometimes she didn't know everything what was going on, but
Mhm.
even then, she was very caring for them. I found the character of their mother very fascinating because she was very much like Marianne. And at times, Eleanor felt like she had to mother her, it seemed, and like making sure she was using her sense and making good judgment calls, which
Right.
I did realize at this point, a couple points here, that perhaps Eleanor could give her mother a little grace and
Yes.
that there was room for frivolous, frivolity
Frivolity.
and
Hmm.
frivolous things in their life.
Right.
Because Eleanor was not having that at all. So, and we just talked about, what's the man we talked about again?
Sir John Middleton.
Sir John Middleton. We talked a lot about him. He was very focused on hunting and fishing and, well, maybe not fishing, but all of the outdoor manly man activities. And his wife was she was all about her children. What do you have?
So, I also talked about Mrs. Dashwood and how she's so similar to Mary Ann, and Eleanor sees herself as a maternal figure to her mom and to Mary Ann, and she's always like, "Well, I can't tell them this because they'll be hysterical, and I don't want to upset them." And I find that very infantilizing.
It
I
is.
think I think that she they are adults and they can handle things. Sure, they might be overly emotional at first, but they're still going to be able to handle it. And I think it's very very strange how she seems to view Mrs. Dashwood, even though Mrs. Dashwood is a pretty good character. She cares about her daughters. She wants the best for them, but she also thinks that the best for them can be accompanied by being in love. Like she wants them to find good husbands, but also she'd like for them to be in love, which I like. And then, yeah, I talked about Mrs. Jennings too, and we already talked about this. I just love how she's pretty comical, but she's also caring, and she's with Eleanor and Marianne the entire time. Marianne is so, so sick, and she just wants to help.
Yes.
And I loved that. And I thought that she was, in some senses, almost a better mother than Mrs. Dashwood because she's constantly there. And she doesn't know the full story of what's going on with the girls, but she still cares and she wants them to be okay.
Exactly. I think her position in society and her wealth allowed her to be there for them in the situations they were in, whereas
Absolutely.
Mrs. Dashwood was confined to the cottage.
I'm not trying to say that Mrs. Dashwood couldn't have been a better mother, but in the writing
In
of
the
how
writing and the
much
scenes we saw,
with the scenes that we saw and how much Mrs. Jennings is around, she just comes across as a little bit more of the motherly figure for the
yes.
two
She was
girls.
a very generous woman too, who was willing to like support the women when they were there, and she was willing to use her resources to introduce them to people.
And then the one person we have really not talked a whole lot about is Willoughby. Willoughby is such a unique character because is he a con man?
The word that came to my mind, because I've read historical romance, is rogue. He's a rogue.
One of the things that I think Eleanor nails on the head is that he's chasing the cash, sure, but he does love Marianne. At the end of the day, he's going to spend the rest of his life regretting her because
Mhm.
she was actually the proper fit for him.
Right, but
But
he wasn't brave enough to take that leap.
he wasn't. And they go back and forth between this, like, would Mary Ann have been enough for him in the end? But then she's like, but he also went out and got another girl pregnant, a teenager girl pregnant,
Right.
and how can we justify that?
He would have come
So,
with so much baggage for
so much
Marianne.
baggage. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it sounded sort of like his family was also a little unpleasant, so, better to escape that. So
Yeah.
Willoughby is such an interesting character, and I just hate him from the first time he shows
I
up.
did as well. He seems so suave and so smooth, very
Mhm.
playboyish,
Yes.
and
It's that
yeah.
charming personality that's immediately off-putting. You're just like,
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing
"No."
underneath there either.
Exactly. I do appreciate that they give Willoughby the characteristic of he likes to read and he likes music just like Marianne does, but so does Colonel Brandon. Like, there's
Yes.
all the elements Marianne is looking for, but in a man who's steady and calm and
And
present
stable
and
and
stable.
loves her selfishly.
Did you connect with any of the characters and why?
Okay, so this is a very interesting question for me
Okay.
because at first I felt most closely connected with Eleanor. And I think that's because when I observed how she handled heartbreak, I was like, I would like to handle heartbreak like that so well. But as I thought about it and as I got to know the characters and after some discussion with you, I would like to be an Eleanor at times, but I think I am probably more of a Marianne. I definitely have big emotions that I show and that I probably think I would handle heartbreak way more like Marianne than I would Eleanor. By the end, I admired Eleanor, but I felt like I was probably more Marianne.
So for me, as a teenager, 100% connected to Marianne. Because I love reading and I love music and I'm not shy about my
Mhm.
emotions and unfairly I thought Eleanor was a little bit of a boring character because she is just so closed off. But as now that I'm in my 30s, I think I'm a little bit more Eleanor than I am than I was as a teenager. I'm still probably Marianne, but I'm a little bit more in the middle than I was as a kid.
It's interesting you say that because I wrote the same thing. If I was closer to Mary Ann's age, I probably would have acted more like her. But in my 30s, I feel like I would have the judgment to act more like
Right.
Eleanor.
What character development or lack of development did the main characters go through?
I actually felt like Marianne developed the most. Some of her core beliefs changed. She did not believe Colonel Brandon could be in love again or should be in love again after he lost his one great love, or so she thought.
Right.
You also see a lot of character development in the very end of the book after she becomes sick.
Mhm.
She apologizes for some of her actions. She vows to act more sensible in a way,
Yes. Yes.
with more sense. I felt Mary Ann experienced quite a bit of character development. I also felt like we were exposed to some of Edward's character development. Maybe some of it
Oh,
had
yeah, that's a
happened
good point.
already and it happened off page, but we
Mhm,
heard about it in the
mhm.
fact that he recognized that when he got engaged to Lucy, he was a young man who was just starting out. He didn't really know what he wanted. And he comes and he tells Eleanor why he's chosen to break off that engagement with her, or, well, she broke off the engagement with him, but why he's okay with that and why he's going to move against his mother and become a clergyman, even though, that's not something she wanted. So I didn't see much character development with Eleanor, to be quite honest.
That's yep, that's Eleanor's pretty much the same from the
Yep.
beginning to the end. I agree with you. Marianne's the one that has the biggest character development. She goes through that heartbreak. She gets really, really sick. She has these conversations with Eleanor after she finds out about Lucy, and I think that also is a point of development in her character because she recognizes that her sister is suffering and doing it silently. I think in a way that calms her down because she's like, I don't think she's in the position where she's thinking I should do it silently, but can do things calmly. I can be a little bit more rational about the way that I react to things. So I think for her, she definitely has the biggest development. Eleanor does not have development. I think she's just the same,
Yeah. Hmm.
not stiff character, but just quiet. I think Eleanor does a lot of internalizing, and the one point where she sort of has a breakdown is when when she's talking about Lucy to Marianne, and she's
Yeah.
clearly upset, and it feels like a kind of a breaking point, but then she goes back to being Eleanor, you know?
Yes. That's very interesting because Marianne was such an externalizer to the sense that she even got sick because of her heartbreak, very ill. And Eleanor is such an internalizer. She doesn't even tell anyone about what happened with Lucy, which frustrated me because I thought Lucy is being a terrible person. And she told you this in supposed confidence, but also she's manipulating you. So I don't think that binds you to her confidence. You have no loyalty to her.
And Eleanor immediately recognizes that she's being manipulated. She immediately
Right.
recognizes it. And yet she continued to, in a way, let it happen. That actually leads to the next point about how characters reacted to different problems. And I think you totally nailed it. Like, Marianne
Yes.
gets sick and she
She
does
does.
not
She
do
gets sick.
well.
And sometimes I felt this secondhand embarrassment for her when she was so dramatic and over the top, like she cried in public. But also, as you pointed out, that probably would be me. I do cry in public because I don't have much control of my emotions most of the time. I first judged her about reacting with such great emotions. I felt like the more I read the book, the more I began to understand her reactions. So it made sense. I admired Eleanor's dedication to her sister, but it was also somewhat frustrating because I kept going, you do not have to be a martyr.
Hmm.
I only came to that conclusion later,
Okay.
actually.
Okay.
At first, I was like, oh, yes, she's handling this so very well.
Right.
And then I became frustrated, especially because, like I mentioned, she didn't tell Mary Ann or even Mrs. Jennings or write to her mother
Hmm.
um, that her lover became engaged to someone else and that she had been lied to. And
Hmm.
this terrible person was manipulating her into supposed to be keeping the secret, which, like I said, I don't feel like she had any loyalty to keep a secret to
No.
Lucy.
This question. If you could read the book from a different character's perspective, who would it be?
Okay, so I have two answers to this. One, I find it would be very amusing to read it from Mrs. Jennings' perspective because she's so funny. She gets things so wrong at times, but other times so right. And she would be able to observe all these young people's their falling in love and the misunderstandings and everything. So, and I feel like her voice, her character voice would be very, very funny and very good to read. The other person I actually put was Marianne because
Okay.
I don't feel like we get enough of Marianne's perspective.
Right. Right. That is such a good point because you're just seeing everything from Eleanor, and Eleanor is she's just like, "Oh, look how delicate and emotional my sister is." But what's going on in Marianne's mind? And how is she viewing Eleanor? You know?
Exactly. Yeah. Does she view Eleanor as cold hearted? Does she view her as a protector? I would love to have known more about Mary Ann's view on the relationship instead of simply Eleanor's views on Mary Ann.
Right, right. So I wrote 2 people as well. My reasoning here for these 2 people is, Sense and Sensibility is about teenagers written by a teenager. I would like a view from an older person. So I wrote
Yes.
Mrs. Jennings because, first of all, hilarious. I would like to know more about her, uh, matchmaking ways and what her thought
Yes.
processes are. And then the other person that I wrote is Colonel Brandon. Be
I thought about him.
and the reason that I wrote Colonel Brandon is, first of all, he is older, right? So
Mhm.
he's our age. And secondly, Colonel Brandon loves Marianne so deeply, but in a very different way than Eleanor. And I want to know where Eleanor is reacting to Marianne's huge emotions. What is Colonel Brandon thinking about this? And how is that keeping his love from being unwavering towards her? So I think he would be such an interesting character
I
to
agree.
read.
I think he'd be a very interesting character, and I really liked him as well.
Yes. Were there specific quotes that stuck with you, and what were they?
I am convinced that there's a vast deal of inconsistency in almost every human character. I thought that was very telling about all the motivations between the characters and just what played out throughout the novel. So there's that one. And
And
then,
such a true quote, you know? Like
yes,
that.
this one is Marianne. The more I know of the world, the more I am convinced I shall never see a man whom I can really love. I require so much. That I require so much. I kind of get it. I
She's
kind
like,
of get
I am
it.
high maintenance. I
Yeah.
love it.
And sometimes I love Elise Myers. I don't know if you know who that is. She's a
Mhm.
TikToker, Instagrammer, and she said, I think it was her. She goes, "You are not too much. If if you think I am too much, go find less. Go
Yes.
find less if I'm too much." And I love that, and it kind of
Yeah.
just fits right in. Marianne is a
Yes.
lot. She has so many emotions and things. And as you had pointed out to me, I am also a bundle of emotions. So if I'm too much, go find less.
Go find less. Exactly.
And then one more was from Eleanor. Lucy does not want sense, and that is the foundation on which everything good may be built.
Very true of Lucy, too.
Hmm.
So, yes.
Yeah.
So my first 2 quotes here are one's from Eleanor, one's from Mary Ann, and it's basically just showing off their contrasting personalities. So the
Hmm.
first one is actually it's both Eleanor and Mary Ann. So Eleanor says, I do not attempt to deny that I think very highly of him, that I greatly esteem him, that I like him. So she's talking about Edward here when she's first falling in love with Edward. And Mary Ann replies, esteem him, like him, cold-hearted Eleanor. Use these words again, and I shall leave this
Mm.
room this very instant. And I love that because it shows Eleanor is doing right off the bat. She's reserved. She's not going to be overly excited about this. She doesn't know what he's thinking, so she doesn't want to say she's in love. In the scene before this, Marianne and Mrs. Dashwood are talking about that they love Edward. They think of him as family already, and Eleanor just can't bring herself to do that. So I think that's a really important part of their personalities. But the other quote that I think is and I think this is such a mature and a very observant quote from Mary Ann. So Mary Ann she's had her heart broken by Willoughby, and she recognizes that Eleanor is going through something, and she's writing to Willoughby, and Eleanor's trying to get her to talk to her. Like, are you engaged? What's going on? What have you guys been talking about? And Mary Ann has not actually been talking to him at all. So she says to him, our situations then are alike. We have neither of us anything to tell. You because you communicate nothing, and I because I conceal nothing.
That is great.
Yes.
I love that.
And it's so true because Marianne is not concealing anything. Sure, she's pretty emotional and she's not really talking much, but she hasn't concealed anything. And Eleanor's over there with her big secret about Lucy and
Yeah.
Edward. And Marianne recognizes that something's going on, but she can't get her sister to say anything.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Again, I think I'd like to be more like Eleanor, but I'm definitely more of a Marianne because I tell all my secrets.
In a lot of ways, I don't think that either one is wrong.
No,
So if it's
as long as
not
it doesn't harm you, which Jane
exactly,
Austen
that's
did a
what I was
good job of illustrating how both, when taken to the extreme, can harm you.
harm you exactly. And then this was one of my quotes that really that I had to write down because it ticked me off. Edward has come to visit them at the cottage. And Mary Ann, Willoughby's already left, so she's already going through her emotional thing, but she's just so happy to see Edward, and she asks him about the fall foliage, and she's waxing poetic about it, and Eleanor turns to her and goes, "Not everyone has your passion for dead leaves."
Yes, I loved it.
I was like, "What?" I was like, "First of all, everyone loves fall, Eleanor."
I wrote that one down too, and I was like, she has no romantic, like, notions in her body. Like, she
That is
can't,
so
like,
true.
see it. She's just like, "It's dying. Why does Marianne like it?" But it was
Yeah,
also
yeah.
so funny.
It was. It is so funny. All right. What sort of mood did the book put you in?
I had several different reactions. Sometimes I was frustrated by some of the characters' actions and their choices. I was amused at many
Mhm.
different points, but overall, I was very happy with the ending and I felt very
Yes.
content with it. It was just one of those nice, feel good, everything got wrapped up.
I wrote down frustrated and happy. Those are my 2
Mhm.
reactions.
Yep.
Because again, yeah, the characters can be so frustrating, and literally all of them. One of the scenes that, stood out to me is the scene where Margaret is telling Eleanor that she saw Willoughby give some of Marianne's hair, and Eleanor does not believe her. She's like, "You're a
I
kid.
know. I
You
know.
don't know what you're talking about, you child." It's just like, "What?
Yes.
Wait,
Oh,
what?" Anyways, here we go. What music gives you the same vibes as this book?
I know Bridgerton is a little bit later than this when this book was written.
Yeah, it's okay.
But I definitely was hearing the soundtrack to Bridgerton in my head while I was reading the book. Specifically, one of my favorite songs from the soundtrack is the rearrangement of Love Story by Taylor
Okay.
Swift, the classical arrangements of modern music. So
Music, right?
I definitely was feeling some Bridgerton music.
For me, I grew up listening to the soundtrack from Sense and Sensibility.
Oh, so you probably can't
So
separate it
that's
really from that.
yeah, I can't. And you know how Mary Ann is that musician, she's playing the pianoforte. So
Mhm.
they've created these beautiful piano pieces for the movie.
Ooh.
So listening to that is very relaxing to me. All right, if someone hasn't read the book yet, what would you tell them that wouldn't spoil the plot to prepare them for what they're about to read?
I would tell them, first of all, I would warn them that this is a classic. So some of the writing seems a bit outdated, but to give it time and to continue on, that it is a surprisingly funny book at times.
Mhm.
And that not to look at it as a love story, but more about a character portrait.
Yes. Yes. I think one of the main things I would tell somebody is not to judge any of the characters too quickly. Like we're
I fell into that
prone
trap.
to yes. So I mean we judge Mary Ann so quickly because she's so emotional. We judge Edward so quickly because we find out about Lucy, but you have to let everything kind of work itself out and then you start to learn that things aren't as the characters aren't as bad as you might initially think.
Yes.
So, yes.
Yes.
All right. And on our scale of 1 to 10, how did we enjoy this book? How much did we enjoy this book?
I gave it an 8 or an 8.5, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
What about you?
I give it a 9.
Okay.
And I think that's just because of my history with the books.
Yes.
It's not my favorite Jane Austen, so I couldn't comfortably give it a 10. But I think one of the things that I love about Sense and Sensibility so much is that it is such a good classic story, but it's not overdone in pop culture. We have
Yes.
so much Pride and Prejudice and so much Emma out there,
Hmm.
but you don't really hear about Sense and Sensibility that much.
Yes.
And I love that. You do hear a little bit more about Mansfield Park, and Northanger Abbey is very unknown to a lot of people, I feel like. But that one's a little bit of a different read, so that's why I didn't have a start with it. But Sense and Sensibility is just, it's a good, classic, very young Jane Austen story.
Yes. Yes.
So
It was very good. I very much enjoyed it.
yes. Yes,
So.
it's one of those things where you're like, "Oh, I could read more of these," you know?
Yes,
When
it is.
sometimes
I am excited for us to cover more. If we don't cover more, I may read some on my own.
there we go. There we go. All right, well, that is gonna be it from us, everyone. Our next reads are going to be, children's literature. Kate, do you want to, inform everyone what we're reading?
Yes. So we are going to be reading. If you are a millennial again, you might be familiar with these. We are going to be reading a Dear America book, When Christmas Comes Again, The World War I Diary of Simone Spencer. And then to contrast that with around the same period, we're going to be reading from the Royal Diaries, Anastasia, the last great Duchess. So if you want to pick up those books at your local library, I believe they're out of print, but they're available on Thrift Books or Etsy or in your
Mhm.
local library, and join us in a couple weeks.
Yes, I will put the informations for the books in the description box below for everyone. So we will be uploading every other week. So we will be covering those 2 books in 2 weeks.
That's right. Thanks so much for listening to our first episode of Book Chat, and we really hope you'll join us again.
Everyone, have a good day. Bye.
Bye.